All right, ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome back once again. Yours truly, Eric Kavanaugh here of Inside Analysis and DM Radio. We got a very special show for you today. I'm very excited. Meeting of the minds, getting AI ready. What does it mean to get AI ready? We're going to talk with several experts today. We've got an all-star cast. We've got my good buddy Malcolm Chisholm on the line, along with Tina Chase. She's with Solidatus. Malcolm's company is Data Millennium. And the second half, we'll have David Sweener, who is an industry analyst, Tiny Tech Guides. You can see his Tiny Tech Guides behind him on the wall. And Adrian Estala from Starburst, who is a veteran of the show these days. And we're talking about all the different component parts of getting AI ready. First off, data lineage. Data provenance. Where does this data come from? Well, guess what? Pretty important stuff. And I came up with an analogy last night thinking about this show. And AI in the enterprise is kind of like a flash final exam halfway through the semester. All of a sudden, boom, final exam. You're like, wait a minute, we're halfway through the semester. Too late. Take the exam now. That's what organizations are doing. They're like, whoa, scrambling. Wait a minute. And those who pull the trigger too soon, I mean, goodness gracious, lots of chat bots going wacky. That's one of the storylines. Is I read an article about a chat bot that went wacky out of the box. I'm thinking, what? That doesn't sound good. You deploy the chatbot on day one, it's whacked out. That is no bueno. Chatbots are, of course, just one form of AI, and Gen AI, of course, has all the attention of folks right now. It is generative. It makes stuff up. So you have to come up with ways to solve that. We'll talk about RAG models, retrieval augmented generation, and my buddy Adrian may rag on RAG later on as he talks about agentic AI and why agentic is probably a better solution for all that. But with that, let me stand back and let Malcolm and Tina Chase take it away. Malcolm, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Eric, and thank you for having me on today. So, Tina, what interests me in terms of data lineage, from where you said, how do you see data lineage having grown in the age of AI? I mean, for me, it was always important in things that, let's say, were regulatory, like BCBS 239, where you have to know or have to prove that data has flowed from your operational systems to the regulatory reports that you turn into the government. But now with AI, like Eric was saying, people seem to be asking more like, where did this come from? Is that the case?
Thanks, Malcolm. Yeah, I am seeing the importance of data lineage, or maybe not even the term of data lineage, but the concept of data lineage become more and more prominent with the proliferation of AI use. I mean, the fundamental is bad data in, bad data out. So when we're talking about a chatbot going rogue on day one, it's partially potentially the chatbot's fault, but it's likely the data that they have access to. So data lineage is a really key tool for understanding what data is actually available to and feeding AI models or generative AI in general. And it's really, really important for traceability. How do I find out if there's a problem and how do I try to backtrack to identify where that is?
And do our tech buddies who are producing the AI solutions understand that? Or do they get to a point where it's, how did this happen? What do I do next? And because they didn't have an understanding of data lineage from the outset, that wasn't baked into the project. Does that happen?
I think it does, Malcolm. So, for example, a lot of our data science or machine learning teams are very used to having data sets that are available to them. And as long as it is a validated and a tested data set and it is available to them to use for experimentation, building models, training models, or RAG data, that used to be where, their thinking ended. But the problem is that once a model is being used in production, it is actually really important to understand the provenance, the quality, and the ownership of the data being used in that attested data set. I spent 5 or 6 years being an AI practitioner who was responsible for building, maintaining models in production at large organizations. And every time we came in to troubleshoot, I would say 90% of the time, something upstream of that data set changed, and we couldn't really identify it easily because we didn't have that data lineage. So I do think that the recognition for the data science and the machine learning engineering team of the importance of this provenance is growing.
That's a great point. And we think of like AI projects as being kind of downstream consumers. What about flipping it? And so you've got somebody like me, a DBA upstream, saying, I think I'll delete that table today. And, hopefully it doesn't affect anybody else. Because I don't have anything in terms of data lineage to look at, I don't know this is going into an AI solution, and I blow them up, and this creates all kinds of issues. Now, are we seeing it therefore not only in the terms of the enterprise as a whole, not only from the perspective of the AI teams themselves, but also from those teams who are further upstream who are dealing with the data that will eventually flow into those models?
You're absolutely right, Malcolm. Like having proper data lineage and understanding where your data is flowing also increases the efficiency of your downstream teams, right? Because you can understand exactly what changes you can make and exactly who you would potentially need to inform about these changes. Like I do think that when it comes to AI and machine learning, people are really concerned about data drift or concept drift. But one of the easiest problems to solve is, did someone upstream make a potentially intentional change? So I definitely know that there's going to be data drift or at least even a change in format that is going to, change my automation rate or change the way that my chatbot would answer this question. So it makes the upstream teams more efficient and, more secure in whatever changes they can make instead of having to try and track down all the potential impacts of what they're trying to do.
What's your viewpoint on how data lineage should be viewed? So if we, think of we can, scan an environment and get the data lineage, uh, where is that sort of best made available or kind of, presented, visualized to all these potential stakeholder groups? And how do we make them aware of that and they should actually go look at it?
Yes, Malcolm. Actually, the way that we approach data lineage at Solidatus is a little bit different than how others, more technical people, might approach data lineage. And the reason why we do that is it's very use case or use specific. It would be extremely challenging boiling the ocean to try and just map your entire ecosystem. But if you're very intentional about data flows that are going to a critical report or an AI model, that is actually what we recommend how you approach the visualization and viewing of your data lineage. So, very business case, use case centric, rather than just trying to scan different applications. Because ultimately, you're trying to achieve your goal of being able to trust the data going into AI models or even out of AI models.
I think that's a great point. I mean, I have worked on projects where the data lineage is an enormous spider web that's totally, at least to me, incomprehensible. But then on the other hand, we have like genuine business use cases where, again, like BCBS 239, which is fairly well, this is a regulation where you have to know how data sets flow from an operational system ultimately into a report. Maybe not an AI use case, but you can see that it's at the data set level. So is it, I this is kind of what you're talking to the use case then that will dictate
Exactly.
what you want. Okay.
Exactly right. And just to elaborate, so BCBS 239 is not necessarily an AI use case, but it does call for you to understand where your data is coming from, the quality, the transformation, the provenance. But in the US, for example, and in the EU, there's more and more regulation around the use of AI. In the US, for example, major banks are required to do model risk management, which means that they need to understand data flowing, any kind of upstream transformations that are going into critical models. And so it is really key to be able to capture that information for that use case. With the actually with the proliferation of Gen AI to be able to summarize information, you can actually cover more and more of your estate with data lineage. Before, you were limited by the visualization and how much one human could interpret. But now, actually, if you're leveraging Agentic AI to summarize your data estate, it's easier for you to view more lineage. So,
Right.
mhm.
That's a great point. Some of the projects that I've been involved in involve getting the data lineage and then showing this to lawyers to ask, is it legal? And do you see that kind of aspect of the use cases in your work?
Absolutely. So, one of the most important things is being able to present the data flows and their accompanying information in a way that answers a question for a specific use case, like a lawyer. So, it's our approach to be able to capture end-to-end data flows for a specific use case, but that lawyer wants to see a specific view of it. And again, this is where you can use either visualization or even a Gen AI summarization to answer for the lawyer. Did we make sure that every single step of the way of this data going into this AI model is controlled and that there's no sensitive information throughout this process? So you can have that summarization or view to solve that question for the lawyer.
That's really helpful. And it's not only the sensitive information; it's license data. Like, we bought this data from data vendor X. Are we allowed to use it in this context in the way we're doing it? And or is this, confidential? Is this trade secrets of our company
Mhm.
that we're putting out there to the world? So I think I love the idea of using Gen AI itself to get that information for the lawyer from the data lineage, because in my experience, it was a lot of work to do that manually. And then it was like, am I sure I
Mhm.
did it correctly? So that's a really great suggestion. So I think we can see that data lineage is
Yeah.
kind of evolving in the world of AI itself.
Yes, and I really see it as a really critical documentation tool. So we're speaking a little bit about summarizing the output or the content of the data lineage. But from a legal perspective, from a regulatory perspective, even from an operational resilience perspective, I want to be able to point back to actual facts, and the data lineage that's driving it provides those facts. So you, instead of having a summarization that is generated based on, data that you have within your data estate, by having the data lineage documented, you can point back and attest to the truth. So I know we're going to speak a little bit about RAG data and Gen AI and Agentic AI later, but I do feel that having this documentation gives you that extra piece of proof. And so if you fear that there's a hallucination, you can go check the facts.
Yeah, that's great. You also wrote, you mentioned operations. So if we thinking about data lineage in the context of operations, is to me is also fascinating, because you might think, okay, there's a new data set required. Well, it hasn't arrived yet. What can I still run, or run in a kind of degraded mode, or put some sort of notification out, or do something like that? Without data lineage, I've never seen how that would be possible. I know we're talking about it from a documentary kind of viewpoint, which is super important, but this idea of tying it into operations as well, how do you see that?
Yeah, I actually think the biggest value of data lineage, the documentation and regulatory requirement is absolutely where a lot of people start. But to be able to scale your technology operations and make your technology operations AI ready, data lineage and understanding your data flows and having it as a living, breathing document, not just like a retroactive document, is really key. Because how are you going to allow AI or any kind of reporting to proliferate throughout your organization without having a firm understanding of what data is being used and how that data is calculated? So I feel that it is very fundamental to any kind of AI program from the start, especially when you're scaling, to have this foundation of data governance and data lineage to be able to adopt any new AI that you're going to use and quickly attest to the data sets that it has access to and the quality of those data sets.
Right. Um, Again, you brought up data governance. So thinking about that, would you recommend, like, an organization, particularly now in the age of AI, has a data lineage policy saying, like, enterprise-wide, if you're doing X, especially with AI, then you have to have this sort of standard of data lineage. And it doesn't, policy doesn't have to have all the technical details in, but it has to provide the framework. and that sets the rules of the road for the entire enterprise. That would bring data lineage up to something, I think, much more visible within an organization. Is that a recommendation you would think is worthwhile considering?
Absolutely, especially for your most critical applications and processes or most highly visible models. So as part of like, you can certify data and data sets as like gold, silver, bronze, for example, and they have to meet certain criteria to be able to be classified into that category. One of the critical items I would say if you're not trying to boil the ocean is the amount of data lineage you need for your gold standard data sets that can be used in AI you should be able to trace all the way from the original source with every single calculation. And you should be able to visualize the rules and policies, transformations, and calculations across that entire lineage. So this way, you know that the data is bulletproof and you feel very confident that it can be used for its proper application. I would also say, looking at the flip side, we're talking about data going into models or being used for business critical processes. I think data lineage is really critical for where the output of AI models are being used and having that visibility. So you know if there's an issue with this model, it is actually contributing to these 5 key reports that you're using, or that the customer facing team is using data from this data set to answer customer questions. So I do think we have to look at the flip side once data goes into AI, where is it being used as well? And data lineage really allows you to do both.
Yeah, I think that's super important. It may also go back into a database. So,
Exactly.
like something about customer propensity to buy or some kind of customer preference, whatever, that then the chatbot uses. So, knowing where it's flowed to and then what it might affect is critical. And I think that's a super important point. I think a lot of people still have this idea of a linear flow from a source to some kind of output, and that's the end of it. And but as you say, these things have all kinds of usages. So that's super important.
Yeah, and real quick, folks, we're up at our first break, but don't touch the dial. We'll be right back. You're listening to Inside Analysis. All right, folks, Eric Kavanaugh back on Inside Analysis, talking with a whole group of experts today. Next up, we have David Sweener and Adrian Ostala. David is from Tiny Tech Guides, and Adrian is from Starburst, really cool company doing agentic work. So, David Sweener, take it away.
Adrian, nice to meet you. I just want to start out. I see this all over LinkedIn. We need to be AI ready. And if you're a data person, it's about the data. If you're a model person, it's about the models. Uh, what does it mean to you to be AI ready? Is it organizational, technology, data, all of the above?
Yeah, I love the question. I don't think anybody's AI ready. I think and you think about it with a couple different lenses, right? There's an architecture or infrastructure lens, and when you sit down and the bosses are out of the room, you look at each other, we're like, we're not ready. When you sit down with governance teams and we start talking, I had a conversation yesterday in San Francisco with a brilliant AI leader, and it turned into governance, and the discussion is we're not ready. And on the consumer side, which is interesting on the consumer side, is the consumer, the business consumer, they need you to be ready. They want you to be ready. When we start talking about what they need to do, their accountabilities, their responsibilities, they're not ready either. And so I think the question about being AI ready is probably the wrong question. I think that maybe a different way to think about it is, are we ready to start, right? Are we launch ready? And it's more of a transformational exercise than, and in IT, all of us, well, some of us, I think we got the gray hair, been doing this for a long time. And every IT transformation we've ever done, has been a journey, right? Not, you don't plant a flag in the ground. Maybe when we were doing SAP 20 years ago, everybody waited till you were done and then you planted the ground and it was ready, it was deployed. But
Right.
just about everything else that we've done, right? Cloud migration, SaaS migration, it's all been about a journey, and AI is certainly like that. It's about a journey. And so the question is less about, am I AI ready? I think the question is, how can I get started, right? How can I get started
Mm.
safely? How can I accelerate? How can I make a difference today? Like, how can I make an impact today? And how can I make sure that I win kind of over a longer term. And there's a lot to that conversation about
Mm.
getting started.
I love that perspective because you're right. We've been talking about data problems forever. We're always going to have data problems. So nothing will ever be pristine and perfect. Maybe one of the hottest things out there right now. I don't know if you heard the term AI agents.
Yeah.
It's a thing. And what I'm trying to understand is what are AI agents? Have you seen any like real use cases? Because the closest thing I've seen, I think, is it can do calendar scheduling for me, and that is so ho hum and meh.
Yeah.
It means nothing to me. Well, like, what are you seeing out there in the real world?
Yeah. It's AI by itself, right? But I love the conversation we just came out of. I was totally tuned into Tina
Yeah,
and Malcolm's conversation there, and everything there resonated. I do think when we talk about AI, though, especially when I talk to consumers, I need to be really careful about framing that in the right way. I came from oil and gas. As a CDO in oil and gas, and in oil and gas, we've been doing machine learning for a long time. It's
sure.
foundational to what we've done. It's not new. We used to have people with 3 PhDs in a basement somewhere. That's all they did. Certainly in banking, it's been there in the fraud AML side for a long time. It's gotten better, and Tina is probably a better expert on that side than I am. But when I think about AI, I'm thinking more about the conversational AI. I'm
Mm,
more kind of getting into the autonomous, the automation of AI, and those are the two areas that I work in. And we build a lot of different kinds of agents, and I focus on the consumer. I like to build agents with customers. 2.5 years ago, we had this idea called LM in a box, right? And so Eric had mentioned earlier in the opening how I might rag on rag. It's not that I don't or that I push against rag. It's just that 2 years ago we realized rag isn't going to be the solution for everything, and it isn't today still, right? And so when I build an agent, first and foremost, I like to bring the business people in the room, and I'd like to keep the
mm,
conversation as non-technical as possible, right? What are we trying to solve with this business? Oftentimes you start with a really simple conversational agent. I want to talk to my data. I want to interrogate my data. My problem is I can never get my data in one spot. My problem is I can never get my data to talk back in the same language, right? And now we're talking metadata,
right.
business metadata. And so there's a magic there that happens when the business teams are involved and they start describing data to you in their language. And that's what I call that. This is how I describe this. This is the way that I would explain this to somebody else. You're starting to build business metadata into kind of that data. I'll use the word data product. And I think
Mhm.
that that's a game changer. And you're able then to create a very simple, let's talk about a conversational agent. I can build a conversational agent with a business team in a day. I build a data product. That data product is then put in front of the right LM, whether it's small language or large language. I can do the text to SQL, and all of a sudden, this business team is able to interrogate a very large data set very, very quickly and very effectively because you've got business metadata and you've got really effective prompting, right? Business prompting. We like to do business rules in 3 layers, probably a different discussion for another time. But that's a really simple use case. And it's not that it's, super advanced. There's a lot of AI leaders out
Mhm.
there, ML specialists that would say that's simple. But you know what? That wins, right? I can build a
Right.
simple solution with a business team, get them to do things with their data they haven't ever done. I love it when somebody walks out and says, I've never been able to see all my data in one spot. Somebody recently said, I learned more about my data in the last 4 hours than I did in the last 10 years. That's an impact. And so am I AI ready? No. Can I make an AI impact today? Absolutely, right? Get the business teams involved. You can start to do that. Yeah.
That's super interesting. So, you mentioned this sort of conversational agent, and when we look at, companies around the world, their data is everywhere. Like it's all over the place. And so how do businesses even approach it? Like we can't get like number rows and columns correct, number one. I'd ask people how many versions of final V5 of a PDF document do you have in your organization? How do you think about stitching data together from these disparate silos where people do their work, whether it's a CRM, Slack, customer call notes, what have you? Do you have to jam it all into one database or how do you think about that?
Yeah, I love the question. You did your homework, David. Thank you for that. So I think I kind of describe this in three boxes, right? There's the first box is all about infrastructure, and it's about kind of getting for me anyway. It's all about getting the data where it sits. As a former CDO, we started, where I came from, cloud migration in 2016, fully understanding we're never going to get everything in the cloud. Today in 2025, hardly anyone has all their data in the cloud. Everyone has an on-prem and a
Sure.
cloud or an on-prem and a multi-cloud. And so the reality is today on the infrastructure side is I have to be able to connect the data where it sits. I love a lake, but I can't get everything in a lake. And so combine my lakes, or rather when I say combine, connect my lakes via query, connect my other sources. And so that ability is kind of the first game changer if I can do that. Then there's a so what, right? And so the so what is, okay, great, you connected the data. Then what do you do? Well, the so what is a second box. And I really like building data products and delivering a business facing semantic layer, right? And so what I mean by that is if I can get all connect to all my data and I can start to create core data products that are understandable by the business. If I bring a finance person in the room and I say, here are the data products, and I show them to them, and they look at them and they just make sense. They jump off the page. They're like, yep, I know what that is. I know what that is, because it's like walking into a pharmacy and looking for medication. You take a shelf off a product off the shelf. You look at it, you know exactly what it is. It's written. I'm a dad shopping for medication for my kids. I know exactly what's in it. I know how to use it. I know who to call if I have a question.
Mhm.
That's the way that I like to think about data products. And I talk about a semantic layer. It's data products organized in a way, business semantic layer, that business teams can understand them. That's that second box. That's the so what. I connect to my data and I can organize it in a way that business people can understand. And then my third box is then I can reuse that same framework for BI. I can reuse that same framework for AI. And so when we start talking about lineage, I can map everything back to one of my core data products. Everything maps back to a core data product that I've certified, that I've governed, that I have accountability around. There's a lot of chaos still on the back end, right? So on the back end, I may have 200 or 300
Sure.
different data sources, but I've certified where the data is coming from. That lineage is still important, but once I've certified my core data products, it makes everything ahead of that much easier. And so when I want to build an agent or a data product, I can do it very quickly. I'm going to take a little bit of that, a little bit of that, a little bit of this. I'm going to put it in this agent data product, and I can serve my agent. And so it becomes much faster, much simpler. And obviously, there's different use cases for different types of AI solutions. But if I'm building a conversational agent, that's fast. That works really well.
It's very interesting. So it sounds like, Tina and Malcolm were talking about earlier, this notion of starting with a use case. And it sounds like you're suggesting the very same thing, but in the context of data products. So do I have a data product per use case, or will one data product feed multiple use cases?
Yeah, I think that first layer core data products. I have a maybe a different show. This thing I call ECIA framework. I have insight data products, agent data products, INA, that are built off of my entity and my context data products, my core data products. But I can solve. Largely I can sit with different teams in a bank or different teams
Mhm.
and kind of in an industry and answer their questions with that same core. The way you build data products, for at least the way that we do for agentic systems versus the way you build them for BI systems, is a little bit different. The schema looks a little bit different. Sometimes we want to have a simpler schema for the agentic systems just to improve performance and improve
Mhm.
accuracy and lower cost. And so you might build the data product itself schematically might look different, but it's coming from the same core, right? And so
Right.
I'm not moving data around for this solution or that solution. I have a logical data product that I just queried these pieces to put it into kind of the right schema, and the team is off to the races. And they wake up the next day and say, yeah, you know what? It isn't just right. I want to tweak it. And so you can very quickly ideate and say, add a column, subtract a column, add a table, do whatever you need to do very quickly because that core is already there.
Fascinating. And just before that question, you talked about this notion of business semantics, and I've been reading a lot about how context is king. So can you explain what is the difference between context and semantics? I think that's important for people to understand. And is one, they related, or is one more important than the other?
The difference is just semantics. I don't know. Yeah, I think someone asked me this question a couple days ago. They said, "What's the difference between an informative data product and a technical data product?" And I said, "Gosh, I think we've been maybe reading too many LinkedIn or Medium articles. Or we're trying to force something here that maybe
Right,
doesn't need to
right.
exist." At the end of the day, context or semantics. I think what I'm really trying to articulate is when I present a product to a business person, I want them to understand it. There should be business language, business thinking built in. And so
Right.
at a basic level, there's every column is described in business terms. Every table is described in business terms. Every data product is described in business terms. That's what I'm thinking about just from a context perspective, metadata perspective. From a semantic layer perspective, now it's a little bit different. Right now, I need to really start thinking about relationships. And so I can take a context data product and add it. So in my framework, C and E, I can take this data product and add it together with other data products to create an answer, right? So I can
Mhm.
start to build relationships. I've got great friends that are all about knowledge graph, and I'm with them. Like I can't wait
Right.
to get to knowledge graphs, but I think I have to do this first, right? I need to be able to build in business metadata and organize it in a way that my business teams can understand today, context metadata, semantic layer relationships, and I can do that now fairly quickly. And once I've got that going, now I can start, and then I can bring in a semantic, sorry, a knowledge graph based semantic
Right.
layer, more of a digital ontology, and now I can build that quicker. But I think I have to start there right now. Am I AI ready? I can do this today, and maybe tomorrow I might be knowledge graph ready. Right? This part of that journey, part of that transformation.
Okay. That's super interesting to me, and I definitely agree with your point. And another thing I was thinking about is we've been talking about very simple agents, conversational agent, and you can see that they can get more complex, and you can chain these things together. I can't even get my GPT to come out with a right answer about half of the time. So what could possibly go wrong, Adrian, when we stitch these things together? And what I guess the real question is, what sort of governance do you need when you're thinking about agentic AI?
Whew, tough. That's a big question. So on the governance side,
Well, it's the
that
longest segment, so we
yeah,
gotta
no,
get the
no, no.
big questions
I
here.
love it. I love the question. Let me answer in a couple different ways. The first thing is if I put my CDO hat back on, right? There's a
Hmm.
way that I think that I have a DM book on my shelf, right? The data management book of
Yeah, yeah,
knowledge.
that's right, that's right.
And if I think about governance the traditional way and how we've been doing governance for the last, and I'm gonna say 20 years, but the reality is DMBOK is still fairly new, probably 10 years.
Hmm.
And so how we've been doing data governance in the last 10 years, that doesn't really work where we're going, right? And so I need to rethink and reshape the way that I approach AI governance. And it's everything from how I think about access management, RBAC to ABAC, to how I think about delivering data, from delivering data to applications to delivering data to individuals to self-service, right? In a DMBOK world, there was almost a line where of what we, if you're on this side of the line, you do all the data work. If you're on this side of the line, you just ask and wait for it to be delivered. In the new world, everybody's has different parts or self-service,
Hmm.
right? So we're in the process right now of rethinking how the processes that we rely on to deliver data governance. At the same time, there's AI capabilities being brought up to help us do it, right? I have AI
Hmm.
capabilities for data classification. I never had that. God, I would have, that had that 10 years ago, man, I wouldn't
Right,
have the
yeah.
gray hair.
Yeah.
There's AI capabilities for quality, AI capabilities for metadata. There's so much, and Tina mentioned a few as well. So I am as a governance leader trying to create the new approach, but trying as much as possible to think about how AI is going to change it. So I'm ahead of the curve and not always
Right.
catching up. And so that's
I,
really, really important. Eric, sorry, you had a
yeah,
point.
and folks, we're time up. Got a break right here, but we'll be right back. You're listening to Inside Analysis. All right, folks, back here on a great inside analysis. Malcolm Chisholm of Data Millennium and Tina Chase of Solidatus. Next up, we got David Sweener of Tiny Tech Guides and Adrian Estella of Starburst. But Tina, take it away. I think you have some questions for Malcolm. Let's turn it around. Go ahead.
Thanks, Eric. So, Malcolm, we've been talking about the evolving role of data governance and security and groups working with an AI. What have you observed about the changing roles and responsibilities, or maybe even overlap of roles and responsibilities as this is evolving, as AI is being used more and more?
So I think what I've seen is that initially we had data governance going back to 2005 when it really started to emerge on the stage. And about 2014, I was working in a client where they had data governance and it wasn't AI governance, but it was model governance. And they fused the two because I think you need them both together. And I've seen that now at several other companies that I've worked at. So I think that's an interesting evolution. The issue I see is that the pure data people don't always understand the issues, some of which you referenced earlier, like model drift. How does that, what is that, and how do we govern that? So the you need specialists, but there's a great deal of overlap because data is so important for AI. So I think there's still some distinction in the actual practices. Like I do think there's a centralized need for governance of AI, like setting strategy and escalation points for experts. And I do think we need to see sort of AI experts, governance experts embedded with engineers to make sure on a project the governance is being done. But I think the two groups kind of need to be fused, even though there may be different responsibilities within that group. So that's the way I've seen it.
And my last question is maybe a cheeky question. You wrote an article recently on your website about having an AI subject matter expert. Could you explain what that is and how it could potentially help bridge the gap between these two organizations?
Right. So you can have an SME. So part of the point, I think, if I remember the article correctly or the post correctly, is that there's data, and the data infrastructure we have is incredibly complicated. We're asking human beings, or have been asking human beings, to go out and document it and do this, and the scale is just too immense. It has to be automated. The way to do that is through AI, like look through emails to find, to pull out all the information about data quality issues, something like that. So then you could have AI be the data steward, and within a particular domain, I think context is important, to then provide or answer the questions that people need to ask, rather than have legions of analysts crawl over all of this stuff. You also see the same thing in source data analysis, where it's so difficult to do that, but AI could help. So I think that might be a direction we're going to be forced to go in, quite frankly.
Yeah, like reading the article, it seems like almost having an internal agent that helps you bridge the communication gap and provide the relevant information, maybe even between the IT department building models and the governance department who is responsible for overseeing it. And just like having that trained on your proprietary information to be able to help bridge this gap.
Right. Why not? I mean, I think it's a great thing. And the AI has the capacity to digest this enormous amount of information. Yeah, a lot of it's technical, but a lot of it's in documents too that could be read. So it seems like a natural thing. I'm surprised we haven't seen more of it yet, but maybe it's coming.
Yeah, I mean, what data governance person doesn't want to automate their way out of their own job, right?
Well, I think they'll be freed up for better things.
Exactly.
Yeah,
All right,
that's
well,
pretty
thank you,
funny.
Malcolm.
We had a guest on the show a few weeks ago, Dr. Lisa Palmer, who made a quote just along those lines, and she said, "If you tell your employees that they are going to be replaced by AI, they're going to be wildly unmotivated to help you get that done." And I thought to myself, that is one of the funniest comments ever. And she's like, these leaders need emotional intelligence, not just business acumen, but even from a business acumen perspective, that doesn't make any sense. And, I think we're seeing now that, well, in fact, Stephen Klein, it's PH and then KLEIN on LinkedIn. He writes all sorts of very controversial posts about the Gen AI revolution. He listed one the other day that listed all these layoffs, I mean, like tens of thousands, I think, from Amazon and just a whole bunch of people. And he said, these layoffs are not happening because AI works. They're happening because AI doesn't work. I was like, oh
Yes.
man, that's brutal. But quick comment from you, Malcolm, on that. We got about 5 minutes left.
Well, yeah, you can go to layoffs.fyi to track the latest in the tech layoffs. But there was one thing I forgot to ask Tina,
Yeah, go ahead.
which is important for a lot of people, which is structured data versus unstructured data, and how we think about lineage with unstructured data. That was something that came up on a project I was on recently. So I'd like to get your perspective on that, because a lot of folks were interested in it.
Yeah, and I think the art of the possible is so much more now than it was previously because, again, using AI, we can actually generate metadata for unstructured data in a programmatic way, whereas previously you might have had to do that manually. So now, all of a sudden, the world of unstructured data is available for proper tracking and documentation, whereas before it was just too much information to handle at once. So I'm very excited to see the tools and capabilities that are coming around to allow you to include that in the understanding of your data estate. I know we're working on some innovation around it too, but I'm just seeing like using AI to be able to understand it, track it, document it, makes it available for you. So it's actually very viable for you to use these unstructured document sites to feed a critical report or an AI model now.
I think that's great for people to know. Thank you.
Yeah, we got about 3 minutes left in this segment, so maybe Tina, I'll throw one more question over to you. When you folks go into a client and you start helping them map out the data lineage, what does that look like? How do you actually deploy? How does that process unfold? How long does it take?
Yeah, so the way that we approach it, as I said earlier, very use case based, because the whole point is not just to have a document, but to have a document that you can use for a specific reason. So we often go into our client site. Our technology is really easy to deploy. It's got all these scanners for you to scan and capture this information and stitch it together. The exercise of actually building it the first time is usually extremely valuable because based on our automated scanners and stitchers, we identify systems that you didn't know were actually
Right.
part of this process.
Right.
Um, and if we can access, like, we can scan over 100 different types of systems in a couple weeks because of our scanners and stitch them all together.
Wow.
But what we're really trying to do is not just scan the technology perspective, but it's to layer the context. So we want to put ownership, quality, rules and regulations that are applicable, and like be able to make that information usable. And that is actually where we work really closely with our customers to define why they wanted data lineage in the first place. So it's usually very much a guidance, trying to understand the use case, and then the actual scanning and stitching, even for really complex technologies, tends to go pretty quickly and be very illuminating.
Yeah.
So we help them identify their gaps in knowledge.
Well, see, that is such a crucial point, and I'm just going to go ahead and say this, folks. A tool like Solidatus is something you absolutely must have before you start pointing AI algorithms at all of your data. Because to your point, Tina, a lot of times I promise you, people are like, what is that system? I don't know. What is that system? Where is that data going? What are you talking about? I don't even know what that system is. And it's that kind of visibility you need to understand what Malcolm was referring as to the spider web earlier. But if you have a tool that allows you to kind of connect all those dots and figure out what's really happening, that's extremely valuable. And not just from a data perspective. There's a company years ago I came across. They're not really in the data lineage space. They're really more of a security profile. But what was their name? Very, very interesting. Oh, I just had it and I lost it. But what they do is they scan your entire environment and then they build out a digital twin of your entire environment. So all the nodes, all the databases, all the different systems. It's Extra Hop. That's the name of the company, Extra Hop. And I thought to myself, what an incredibly valuable thing, because once you can see it all, then you can start digging in, saying, okay, who's using this? Who's using that? When you
Mhm.
have that, now you have a story to tell and you have a defense. You have an audit trail, if you will, of all the sources and the targets and what that all means. And that really allows you to optimize your information architecture. And folks, I cannot stress enough the importance of really understanding what you've got in there before you start pointing AI algorithms at all this stuff. I joke that training an AI algorithm is like raising a kid. You got to be careful what you say around them because they will absorb everything. So if you curse in front of your kids, don't be surprised if they curse back. Well, folks, we're up in our next break. We'll be right back. You're listening to Inside Analysis. Folks, back here on Inside Analysis, talking to a whole panel of experts. This is a lot of fun today. Adrian Estala and David Sweener are on again here. And maybe, Adrian, you might have a question for David. Throw a curveball at that guy.
Yeah, thanks for that. I have a lot of questions for David. I'd love
No,
to hear
no
more.
hard
Oh,
questions.
no.
Give
I'd
me
love to
the
hear.
meatballs. I give you the hard ones. You give me the meatballs.
I'd love
Okay.
to hear more about the books on your shelf, but maybe we can discuss that later. You asked me a question. Last question you asked me was around data governance.
Sure.
There's the other side to that, right? And I think the way you presented the question was, gosh, I can't even get this done, and governance seems almost insurmountable. How do we fix governance so that we can start delivering faster? My challenge would be, and the question is really going to be around business enablement. You're on David, you're on the business side. Let's present you as you're a business consumer, right?
I work in marketing,
You work
sure.
in market, even
That's
awesome.
not even a stretch.
I find that the marketing teams you work with are some of the most advanced, right? I can deliver AI agents to marketing team much faster than just about anybody else in the organization. I never knew that till I started working marketing teams. And so I get that. So I bring you into the room and we build an agent, right? What I find is when we build agents with business teams, marketing teams, we move so fast. And so bring you in early, help you be a partner in the development. You're a marketing person. I say, let's go build an agent. What are you worried about? What concerns you? Is it the fear of the AI, the fear of the data, the fear? What's the consumer fear when I bring you in to build an agent?
I think the biggest thing, I'm going to put the job thing aside for a minute. It's been one of the most popular blogs I wrote was, will AI take my job? Maybe. And so let's put that aside. I think the biggest fear is we get generic output and it's meh, it's vanilla. And
Yeah.
what I mean by that, you lose sort of your identity because right, this was trained on the world's internet. We scarfed up everything and it gives you the median response. So I think if you try to do that at scale, how do you check that the content that's going out, if you're automating this, is checked? I don't think there's actually a good governance answer to that today. I used to work in data science and manufacturing. I'd approach it from a manufacturing perspective. Like you can't do quality control on every widget or pharmaceutical you produce. So what do? You do sampling. And I think that's probably the only way to do. But I think it's losing your identity and just having this AI slop, which is already out there going out and you're not even aware of it. That's one of my biggest worries. That's one. The other one is factual accuracy. It makes no matter how much RAG or whatever, it still makes up facts all the time, and it dutifully will give you the page number, the citation. The problem is it's completely made up and it doesn't exist. How do you check for something like that? That's what I'm worried about.
Perfect. I love it. Because when we build agents on the IT side, and then we say, hey, hold on, hey, David, just give me 18 months. I hate that plan. And I'll give you something, right? But what if I say,
Sure.
hey, David, I want to do a 90-day agent, and we're going to have the first agent working in a week, right? And here, let me set some expectations with you, right? You're going to actually help us put the data in the box. So when you sit down with AI governance and you start trying to explain how and make sure that we're not exposing more than we need to, you would say, well, I'm only exposing what's in the box. And you're going to help me put that data in the box. So now you know the data that's in there. And David, you're going to help me describe it, right? I'm going to listen to you and you're going to tell me what, back to metadata, right? You're going to tell me your words. And then we're going to put an agent in front of it. And don't worry, we've already got a template for the UI that sits in front of it. And I want you to start asking questions. And here's what's going to happen. When you get started, some of the questions you ask, you're going to get the wrong answer. But you know what? Together, we're
Right.
going to figure out why it's wrong. You're going to say, oh, Adrian, I know why it's wrong because I never told the LLM that column is actually global revenue, right? Let me go back and fix the metadata. Once we start to work together and you start to fix it, and then you say, well, Adrian, I really want the answer to look like this. Now we start prompting. When I bring you into the room and we start to create those prompts, we call them business rules, and we start to improve the metadata and you start to get better answers, what I've created for you and in you is confidence, right? Then you walk out of the room like John Travolta with the paint can, right? You're strutting because you just built an agent. And it wasn't about building the agent with you. What I've done for you now is giving you the confidence to come back tomorrow with new ideas. Hold on, can I do this? Can I add this? Can I add more data? What if I did this? And then we're off to the races, right? And so I think that's what we're trying to create with business teams when I talk about building agents. And so your answers were perfect because I think we get those same concerns when we work with business teams.
I love that notion of this business IT partnership, and I'm a firm believer in that. I'm curious your perspective on with generative AI. I can do a lot more than I could perhaps do previous. And I seeing this across roles, across my clients I work with, people are doing different things. So how much can I do myself versus how much do I need IT help? Because I'm always going to want to tweak it and change it and
Yeah.
update it. Like how do you see that dynamic? And is that shifting? Is it you get me
Yeah.
going and then here's how you add stuff to it, or and what does
Uh,
that look like?
I mean, I need you. If I'm a business leader or CDO, I would say I want to build you the guardrails so that you can do almost everything yourself. If I can
Mhm.
deliver the data to you and it's safe and it's secure and it's governed and you can only see what I'm allowing you to see you by column or by row, and every time you touch the data, I see it, and every time the data changes, I see it. I got governance covered. I've got security governance. I got compliance covered. Now it's really up to you, right? And what's happening today with business teams is business teams are engaging every consultancy in the world, right? I don't want to you say the word shadow IT, but they need the ability to experiment. So David, I would say I want to give you the ability to experiment, build any agent you want. We have a marketing company we work with, not our marketing company, it's an advertising agency. They have 1,400 agencies around the world.
Mhm.
And they build agents in Azure and Amazon and Google. Everyone's building
Yeah,
different
sure.
kinds of agents on their own, 1,400 of them. Centrally, you've got Starburst data products, right? And
Hmm.
all we do is deliver the data via API or MCP, whichever format they want to use. But that's agility, right? That's experimentation. I can allow teams to very quickly experiment with whatever agent they want to build. Let them fail, right? I want to build 10 agents in 10 weeks. Go. Only 4 of them
Hmm.
worked. All right. Hey, that's good. That's a pretty good number there. Experimentation is really important. And I think business led, David led experimentation, I think is the key.
Yeah, and you saw this. Everybody's seen this. 97% MIT study out there. I think what
No
people
way.
are actually, it's misattributed. It's saying 97% of projects fail. It's actually they failed to deliver business
Yeah.
value.
Yeah.
To your
Business
point,
never saw it.
that's the core. And sure, I can do things faster and what have you, but I think getting that business value at scale is a little more ethereal for a lot of companies.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mm, cool. We got about 3, 4 minutes left in this segment. And Adrian, maybe just explain, because a lot of people may not know exactly how Starburst works. You use this query engine, Trino, right, which is a massively parallel query engine, such that you can pull data from any number of sources and pull it into your data products, right?
Yeah, thank you. I'd like to think it like describe us kind of in 3 boxes right there. The initial box is the kind of the old federation, if you will, that Starburst is exactly what you described, right? Our ability to connect the data where it sits. And so we've always done that well. Back when we were invented at Facebook, as you said, that's what we were invented for. On-prem cloud, fantastic. And I think that's great. And I don't, that is kind of what made us famous. But I think today in an AI world, I think we talk about AI readiness. I think what's making us even more famous, if you will, is this data product semantic layer, right? Being able to deliver data to business teams and being able to do it quickly, right? You lower the cost of experimentation, accelerate the time to experiment, and you've got something. And so I think that middle box where we're presenting data products and we're presenting a business facing semantic layer and using AI tools to do it. We have an agent built into Starburst, which is great. We also enable teams to build their own agents, as I described earlier. And so I think that's really, when you think about Starburst today in the modern AI age, that's the way that you should think about Starburst. We still do the federation. We've always done it. We always will. But this is kind of now really making us special because if you can truly get to the data quickly, imagine what you can do with any agentic strategy on the front end. And the third box then is just, is that front end, right? Whether it's BI or applications or AI, it's just our ability to deliver the data.
Well, that's great
Mm.
stuff. Well, folks, this wraps our Inside Analysis episode and first half of our virtual summit. Second half is coming up next. You've been listening to Inside Analysis.